Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Conscious Parenting. Goodbye, bullshit. Hello, happiness. Conscious Parenting Edition. Today we have Elle and Hilary with us. Welcome, ladies. Hello.
Thank you. Thank you.
And so today, continuing on the discussions from the previous shows that we had, we were thinking about talking about discipline, how each one of us disciplines our kids, what words we use, what are the things that we discipline for, and also when you're in a bigger environment, it's easy sometimes to discipline your kids at your own house. And then it sometimes becomes difficult when you do it in public or when you do it with family members. So we're just going to talk about different discipline techniques that we've had in our lives. Who wants to go first? I can go first. I'll start. I know for me, it's been different actually for Ilya growing up. I When he was younger, to be honest, nothing would work for this kid. Nothing, absolutely nothing. He was one of those kids that I don't know if I told you. I told him to clean up, like his toys were just like all over the place, and he wasn't even maybe first grade, kindergarten, maybe not even, and he refused. And I gave him a warning. I said, okay, we really need to clean this up. You played with it. I can help you as well. We'll sing our song. You know, everybody knows that. Clean up, clean up. Oh my God, that song. So we'll sing the cleanup song and we're going to clean up. And he absolutely refused. He said, no, why don't you do it by yourself? And I said, no, if I'm going to do it by myself, I'm going to do it the way I'm going to do it, which means I'm going to take all your toys away. And he said, go for it. And I picked up the bag. I said, you sure? I'm going to take all these. If you don't want your toys, the toys are going to go away. He's like, okay. So I proceeded, take all his toys, put it in the bag. And I said, since you don't want the toys, I actually did. He didn't realize I had two bags. I wasn't going to give all the toys away. But I said, okay, so since you said you don't want your toys, let's go. We're going to go give them away. And there's a place close to us. And we went there and he did not say anything. And he said, okay. And so he has been my difficult child. Well, he's my only child, but the difficult in terms of discipline, because he would just stand in front of you and like, go for it. And I had no way of taking anything away or doing anything. And to be honest, at some point I stopped with like, I made sure that if I was going to discipline, it had to be really be for a good reason and not to be something that I get egg on my face anymore, sort of. So, and as a older kid now, since he's into electronics more, that's been my to go, that I'm going to take electronics away. And that, yeah, no, sometimes it works, most times it works, that one. But so what has your experiences been like?
Elle, you want to?
Sure. Since I have the 19-year-old who technically can't be disciplined.
Exactly.
But he can be incentivized and motivated, trust me.
I love that. Incentivized and motivated. That's the word.
And frankly, I think I had most of his childhood to practice that. He's not unlike Ilya, where Zane is obedient in his desire to please, and he kind of wants to go with the flow because he doesn't like a lot of chaos. But he's also willful, which he honestly gets from me. And so we're people that just, if we believe in something and are convicted, we relentlessly stand. And I felt like that was an important quality. So I was always walking this line of not wanting to break his spirit or take that quality away from him, because I felt like in the right context, it would serve him. Usually when I chose to discipline, it was because I felt like he was on a spiral, and it's like, just stop the spiral. It usually, I found myself doing better being short-sighted because I knew that his nature was generally good. And if he was acting out in a way that I felt was unacceptable, and to me, unacceptable is you can feel any way you want, but you can't be a jerk. And verbatim, that's often what I would say. Like, every emotion, thought, and experience is welcome here. But at the point that everybody's uncomfortable, that people are being offended, if you're kicking something or throwing something, or like, that was my boundary with him. And so I often just found myself doing whatever I had to do to stop the spiral, which for us, because my particular child only gets to this level if his feelings are hurt. He's not going to rise to that space unless there's true, like, heartache level frustration, disappointment. And when he does that, we have to separate. So in my home, it's usually you got to go to different rooms. This just has to stop. I never consider myself to have strong skills to walk out of something like that. I'm pretty good at preventing it. But with my child in particular, once we get to about 7, he's going for 10. Like, that's it. And so it would be different rooms. When he was little, though, he only had a few temper tantrums, but still a similar sort of space. I've actually put him in the garage. Like, he would just be clowning, like 3 to 5. And I would move him room to room closer to the door, letting him know that you can't be inside this house behaving in that manner. Even as a small child, that was my expectation. And sometimes his butt ended up in the garage, like, not around gasoline and kerosene, but like, we had like a little 1.5 car garage, and he might even end up in the Volvo. But it was just like, I wanted him to understand that as a family, that's a privilege, and you have to be responsible and treat that with care. And I had people who didn't agree with that sort of discipline, but I wasn't hitting him. And I was stopping the spiral, and I was clarifying to him what the expectations were as a part of our family.
I love what you just said too about the you knew that he was getting, emotional about something, and that you could tell that that was going to get worse and spiral, like you said. And I think it's easy to note that in a younger kid. And now that my son's 17, I'm forgetting that piece of it. And you just reminded me. So thank you, which is like, he may be glaring at me right now and not opening his mouth, but that's going on still inside him, that little kid piece of it almost. So thank you for sharing that. And we're arguing a little bit on a lot right now. So our discipline has always been, again, it sounds similar. He really didn't seem bothered by a lot that you would try to discipline around. And so we did everything all the parenting books said, the timeouts and the toy takeaway and all the rest of it. And it was just finding something that was meaningful to him. And then that has varied over time. And it could have been time with his dad, time with me, but not in a way that is, I don't know what the right word is. Not in a way that's like hugely punishing, but it's like to be with, your dad or I, you need to not be engaging in this behavior. So we're going to remove ourselves from the equation, that kind of thing when he's younger. I think when they're older, the discipline is just really tough. And so now we're in this natural consequences place. So what are the natural consequences of that? Whether that is in the home, and you know what, I'm not going to talk to you when you're in that mood, so I'm peacing out. Or I might get emotionally hijacked by the situation. I find myself kind of amped up. And then when we talk about it later, because we always debrief, it's like, I'm sorry for what I did. I should have walked into another room, like you were talking about, Elle, and being smart about that. So I feel a little rambly at the moment. Apologies, but
no, that's perfect.
Right,
actually, my situation very similar. I've been changing my tactics. So I did used to sort of, you're right, give myself a timeout. It was at some point, it was both of us needed to time out. Like, you go to your room, I'm going to go to my room, cool down. Or I had my space, he had his space. But again, for him specifically, because there were so many outside stuff that was happening to him, that feelings of not being loved, accepted, whatever, there was a lot of emotions that they were also becoming more explosive emotions. And during those times, I noticed he doesn't want to be left alone, and he doesn't want to be in his room alone, and he doesn't want to be left alone either. So a lot of times, and each time would be different way that I needed to handle. Like, it's like, okay, what are we dealing? It's like, which version am I playing with here? And there were times that, okay, the timeout worked, that we both said, hey, we need a timeout. Or I said, okay, right now you're in this place, I cannot be with you. One of the other things that I would do is close my eyes, so that I said, okay, I need to close my eyes right now. I'm listening to you, but if I see what you're doing, I'm going to react to it. And I know myself, if I react to this, it's not going to go well. So we had talked about this, that if I'm closing my eyes, it means that I cannot see like all that's happening, all this explosion happening in front of me. And then sometimes, to be honest too, that he was in such a difficult place that all that stuff needed to come out, and I knew it would be useless for me to do anything. It's just like, let's write it, let it happen, and then the debrief, like after the storm has ended, then the calm has come. It's like, okay, you cannot do this, this is not appropriate, this is not appropriate, and we need to talk about these things so it doesn't happen. How do we prevent this for you to get this high so fast? And it's taken us many years. And, you know, to be honest, we've had destruction in the house too. But now looking back at it, all of it was necessary, because each phase I saw him like in those things. It wasn't that he was being a bad kid. It wasn't that he was trying to be disrespectful or hurtful, anything like that. It was just, there's a lot and I just don't know how to do this. And he would just like throw it all out. And at the end, it was like, okay, can you just come hug me now? And all he wanted is like, okay, just don't talk, no more talking. I just want to be held and hugged. And then, you know, the next day we would go through everything. And now, luckily, we don't have those big explosions. Probably the first year, to be honest, if I'm being truthful, in a long time. But now we can communicate better. Now it's more like a teenage stuff that we talk about, and that's okay. You know, we have set rules. You do this, Xbox gets taken away. But I had to play that. I couldn't discipline him all the time, and as he was doing that stuff, so either close my eyes or separate. And sometimes, like I said, he's like, "No, you cannot leave. I need somebody physically here. I cannot be alone right now." So
I really like the closing the eyes. I wish I'd had that. I'm a very visual person, and I wish I'd had that, because even like looking sometimes at their face, it will just make you so mad, because they are making the wrong faces. It is the wrong reaction. And that just, as I say, burns my draws.
yes,
Like that is one that would just get me fired up. It's like, if I could just close my eyes, I bet I could have like.
it's so funny. It's something small, but it's so impactful, especially if like you, I'm visual too. And it's like, okay, if I don't see it, and I would tell it, if I'm not seeing, if my eyes are closed, I would have an easier time staying in me.
Yeah.
Rather than reacting to this explosion that's happening right now, and all these things is, you know, you're saying and you're doing, I just can stay in me better. and
Good.
it keeps both of us safe. See,
I love that.
I do too.
I need to do it at work too.
In the
Let me be real.
car. I can put that a couple places in my
Yeah,
life. And
yeah.
probably bring in the line at the store.
Yeah, yeah. I'm with you. That like could be very handy.
Yeah.
I tell couples this too, that if you're talking to your partner and you're getting into a match that it's like, you know, you did this, you did that, close your eyes, and you're going to have an easier time because also the other thing that happens, you listen better.
Yeah.
Sure.
Sort of like you pick up on those things and you can stay inside and you're not reacting to everything.
Yep.
Like that.
Question for you both. You're getting me thinking, how are your disciplining styles different than how you grew up? Or are they?
For me, honestly, I always say I grew up like a weed, meaning that there was nobody really disciplining me. And also, I think I was so scared of, you know, not being good that I wasn't really doing anything wrong to get disciplined anyway. So I honestly grew up pretty much without any discipline because I didn't even do anything. Like I went to bed on time. I did my school. There was nothing for my parents to, and I wasn't like my dad wasn't involved anyway. And we moved around. There was so much other stuff going on, like with the divorce, my mom, the revolution, moving here. So there's so many other stuff going on that I didn't grow up with discipline.
And I was the opposite. I grew up with extreme discipline. So basically, I was raised in an environment where anything that brought a child into compliance was considered okay. So it was at times completely inappropriate, absolutely abusive. The corporal punishment went on way too long and it was way too aggressive. I would say the way I was raised, the discipline was probably 70% a fail because what it actually evoked in me was I'm not a fighter by nature. Like putting hands on people is like the last thing I would do just in my nature, but it made me like belligerent. So I was definitely one of those kind of case studies where the more people were putting their hands on me, or I grew up with this term, I'll break you. They talked about children like horses, and it was an accurate reflection of how the punishment was. It was always meant to bring the child into compliance and to reduce the adult's discomfort. There was no particular tactic where it was training or guiding or implemented with like a long-term outcome. So what it made me was pretty combative. And I'll tell you what I learned, and everybody listening and watching, I would encourage you to take this in for what it's worth. If you put your hands on a child and your primary form of discipline is combating them, what happens when they get bigger, faster, or smarter than you? It's actually dangerous. You are raising like a little warrior, and when they're not little anymore, you have a problem now. And that's really what I took from my experience was you may have gotten me to comply. And if that was valuable to my family, which I think it was, that's fine. But when I got bigger and faster than my mother, not good. And then I had to decide at about 15, 16 who I was going to be because I was then physically able to combat her. And she would go to fisticuffs with me, especially being a police officer. She was trained in all these techniques, but she also got older. So I had to decide, am I going to be the kind of person who puts hands on their parents because they can, because hands were put on me? Or am I going to be a different type of person? And I chose to be a different person. And then I chose to be a different kind of parent. Does that mean that some children don't need to be snatched up? They might, especially if that spiral is dangerous. So I don't necessarily have a thought that like, you do what you have to do and each parent has to figure that out. But what I did with my son, knowing that I was a solo parent of a male child, from tiny, I bore in mind when I was disciplining him, if he repeats this in a decade or 15 years, will it make sense in our relationship? And if it wouldn't make sense then that's not going to be my method, with him as he's young, because he's learning now what you do in conflict. So that was very guiding for me. And I definitely have talked to a lot of friends with this sort of, it may work when they're 3, but be careful.
I love that too. Like, where were you when Nicholas was like 3? But you're right. I mean, it is, you parent the age versus thinking about what that journey and that continuum is going to be. And I think what you're saying is really powerful. And remembering what they're going to be like. And it's interesting too, because on the discipline front, I had a firm discipline hand that involves sometimes corporal punishment as well as just emotional, all the rest of it. So I went the opposite way, which was, okay, we're just not going to be confrontational at all until I really get over that line. And then it was going to how, kind of that raging thing. And so I've had to really work on that too, to be honest. And like, was never modeled about how to handle all the emotions that are in you. We just repressed them because you were afraid. So how then do you take that experience, try to translate it into being, a good, decent parent yourself, and parenting in a way that changes the dynamic, the culture, the history that you grow up with?
And that goes back to what we've been talking about past episodes, is that the generational trauma that's been passed down. Yeah. Like for me, it wasn't discipline. They weren't disciplining, but there were so many other things that was happening that didn't let me want to engage or do anything that I knew it was going to upset anybody to begin with. And, again, from my perspective, I've seen like you can even have that best intention of trying not to discipline the same way or not discipline, and still, they're gonna have whatever it is that they're gonna have. Like again with Illy, I'm like, it's constantly like, where is this coming from? And he gets it from maybe that side, when he might get it society. There's things that he came his own person. Yeah. And the other question I have for you guys, this is something that I'm always trying to balance out. First of all, I try to make sure he knows it's not punishment. I never liked that word punishment. Like even when he would say, I'm being punished, like it's not a punishment. I have to have certain rules for this house. And if these rules, we agree on it, we talk about it. And when both of us agree, after that point, whoever breaks this, there has to be a consequence to that. And those consequences we've agreed to. So I'm not punishing you that you're bad or done something bad. It's just an agreement that we had, didn't happen. Now what's the consequence? But even that, sometimes, I look at it, I'm like, yes, I go through with it, but sometimes I'm like, is that even really necessary sometimes? So I don't know. There are certain areas I'm still playing with, is like, where is it? Because most of the time that we're trying to even discipline, we're trying to control the situation, in my opinion. We're trying to control them, control the situation, make them do something. And then that goes against the idea of like, I want you to have your freedom of choice as well. Mm-hmm. So how do you have that balance? How do you get that balance?
I can say I struggled with this, especially when Zane got into his later teens, because I felt like definitely I wanted to move away from this space where it was like trying to control the behavior, because they get to a point where they need to be intrinsically motivated anyway. So it's like you kind of have to, I felt like I had to permit more, allow more so that he could experiment with like the natural consequences, like you were saying, Hilary, because me just riding him was not, it didn't feel like it was the appropriate motivation any longer. But one of the things I started shifting with, and it's kind of one of those if I had known sooner sort of things, I realized the conversation needed to not just be about this is what we are as a family, these are the rules of the house. I am a human being, damn it. I shifted into that space a little late. And so one of the things I realized, he was treating me not like a person. And so when I stepped back, so I would actually have to say, especially like that 18-year-old space, this is not your mother talking. This is a grown woman who's paying this house note, who is worthy of decency and respect, and I won't abide it. Not from you or anyone else. Your role as my child does not trump my humanity. Like I had to really take it there because it felt like me just being his mom wasn't enough. And it was like without his ability to see me as a whole human being, just like him, he wasn't going to get it. Because they know our love is unconditional. We're here.
Yeah.
And that unconditional love almost works against us a little bit sometimes. Does that make sense?
Oh yeah. Yeah.
I love what you just said. You're right. I've lately, and I may have said this before, I've lately taken to saying to him, like, I love you, but I don't have to like you. And right now I am not liking this behavior. And it's not how I would want. And I have said that I would not tolerate it from a friend, from a partner, from whatever.
Yeah.
So I love you bringing that up.
And I don't want him to think my love is conditional. And so that commentary has to be pretty, it's a line.
Yeah.
But it's like, if I wouldn't accept this off of anyone else, I should be bare minimum able to get a little bit better from you as a person. And that tends to motivate my child a little bit more. But then sometimes, and this is coming for you guys, when they start adulting and the natural separation happens, some of his greatest pain is me having to say to him, I'm not responsible for how you feel or how you respond. Yeah. And when I say it, sometimes I want to cry because that look in his face of, but you're my mom. But now you know, you're a big guy now. You're an adult yourself. And so some of our struggle has been the balance between what I am responsible for now in terms of his experience and feelings and what he is solely responsible for. And so that's why that conversation of I am a person, and he kind of doesn't like it. It's hard. It's hard to hear that this is going to have to be different. And you're going to have to like kind of stand up on your own and gird your own loin a little bit. It's hard.
Yeah, we started actually that conversation this year. Now that I saw like he is in a better place emotionally and more stable, I say that all the time. I'm a human being. I'm not super mom. As much as you like to believe I'm super mom, I like to believe I'm super mom.
I think you're super mom.
But I'm human.
I think you're both super mom.
So, and as a human, I get tired. And when I'm tired, I cannot deal with all of that. So understand that when I tell you I'm tired, it means I'm tired and I cannot handle those things. There are a lot of things that you can handle by yourself right now. And you don't need me to be there all the time for everything. So we've started having that conversation.
Good for you for starting early. I came to it late, and it was because I remember my son, I think it was around 17. And I think it was about 17. He actually said to me, do you realize, Mom, that he said, I rarely see you sleep. He said, you're up before me and you're down after me. He said, the only time I see you sleep is when you fall asleep. Yeah. And but that was like egg on my face because he's saying like, you're telling me to stop acting like you're super mom, but you're acting like super mom.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like that was his way of communicating that I wasn't letting him see me as a person. So it was like, hey, lady, I'll get with the program, but you got to change the role too.
Yeah. Yeah.
Good for him for saying it.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's one of my favorite things about him is he has he's very astute and he can communicate things respectfully, even for his age, that can be very meaningful in my own growth.
I
Go ahead.
love that.
Question now, another one. So, speaking of the holidays, how do you guys manage the holidays? And because I think that's a place of trigger for everybody because we get into family situations that everybody comes together and everybody's triggering each other, the past stuff, and so it's like this most of the time for everybody. Some can manage it, some cannot. But what do you do when you're in that situation? You're being triggered. Your kid is being triggered. I know that has happened for us that, I see Ilya's being triggered and I know where that's headed to, and I'm trying to stop it. So, how does that all work out for you guys? Is there any good advice, anything you've tried to do for yourselves, for your child to make it a little bit smoother and easier during the holiday time?
What about you, Elle? As I like slowly go into the dark here.
One of the things that was very palpable for me since my child was young, I knew I was doing things differently than like his father's family and then the family that I was raised in. And I was very aware of these choices. One of the challenges in both families actually is there very poor boundaries. People have, I would say the majority of folks had a very blurry sense of where their opinions and beliefs begin and other people's end and vice versa. So one of the things I used to reiterate to my son around this time was, this is what we do. If anything transpires that is counter to that, you let me handle it. And I was very adamant about that because adults in their efforts to have best interests at heart, or adults thinking I was just helping, a lot of times they will take advantage of the child's position as child.
Mm-hmm.
Unknowingly too. Like a lot of times I don't think people were being malicious, but if they stepped back, a lot of times they're not going to come to me. They get the child in a room when they're playing with the other kids or, and so to keep my son from having to defend the choices I make as a parent, that was my rule, was anything counter to what it is we do, just get your mom. No big deal. No shade. Like I just wanted him to not have to be upset at all these other dynamics. They're really big people dynamics, but people will drag children into them. To me, that was the rule. That was the top most important thing. And then anything under that, it seemed to at least remove him from taking responsibility for adults. That was so important to me.
That's great because you're giving him a boundary without actually, saying that here's your boundary. So
you don't have to answer to them. You don't have to fight with them. You don't have to be confused.
Yeah.
Just know that that's above your pay grade and mom's got you.
Yeah.
How about you, Hilary?
For us, it ended up just being time limitation. So what, rather than this fantasy of we're all going to get along together in the same house for 10 days, let's just be realistic about this. And I think everyone finally learned to come to terms with that. Or, hey, we're going to stay in a hotel versus at the house. And some of that was just helpful. Certain topics became, let's just not bring up X, Y, and Z. And if it comes up, let's just nod, whether it's my son or at the time, his dad, let's just nod and okay. We don't need to respond. So that helped a little bit. Maybe avoidance. I don't know.
No, but I mean, during that time, it's a piece. We have a similar approach to you, Hilary. We're limited the time so that we know what is manageable for us, and we keep it within that time. And to be honest, if we're both like not into it at all, like we've been too tired, we've been running around, and we just say, okay, we're not going to meet you guys, or maybe we're going to do it tomorrow when the craziness is all done. And one other thing I know for Ilya growing up, when he was little, I did feel like there were times I would run interference for him where I knew they're saying things that it's going to get him to a certain place that it's not going to be a good place for any of us. You know, so I would run interference. I'm like, okay, he does it a little different. Can we just let him do it his way right now and give him space? And then now that he's grown up, he's learned actually how to change the situation. So like if he sees like they're taking it somewhere else, he'll just take his like, oh, let's go do this now. Like he'll just take everybody. We're not going to do that anymore. I see like how this is going to impact like my grandmother. Let's just take it, everybody. Let's go do this now. And he stops it. And then at a certain point, he just says, okay, now I need to go to my room. I'm tired. Or he just gets himself out of the situation and does something else. So he's been able to manage that.
That's awesome.
That's so beautiful that he at that age has that ability to redirect, which is what you do with 3-year-olds, right? Like he's mastered it. But Hilary, I like what you said about the fantasy we're all going to get along. No, like I think that needs to be highlighted because I think we get so attached to how it should be.
Yeah.
That to me is the fantasy. And so it's like, you know, this is the year that everybody's going to do what they should do. And it keeps you kind of delusional. And so I love that you said that. Like it, for some people and some dynamics, that's just a fantasy. And I love you just being like, okay, this is what it is. And this is how long we got.
Exactly. I love you.
I love that.
It's like, I love you, and we're not going to do that. We're going to stay in our sanity this year.
Right.
It helps. It helps.
See, where were you guys like 15 years ago? I needed that. Ooh, I was up in there dying like water.
Elle, this is I know for us, it's a very recent, it's like past, I don't know, 2-3 years that I implemented this. Before that, we were doing it and it was like, okay, this is not working out. And I had a conversation with my sister this year. I said, you know, this is working out for everybody. We're happier this way. Everybody gets along better. It just works for everyone.
It's so smart. And I like too that you two are affirming to other parents. This is a valid, reasonable option. I love that.
It is. Thank you. Well, and back at you and all of it. These calls or podcasts just make me, I just learn a lot from you both and from whoever's on here. So thank you.
It's good. And we're all here to learn, and hopefully us chit-chatting together, having fun, everybody gets a little bit something. That's the main point here.
Yeah.
Thank you, ladies. Everybody have a great holiday. Thank you for joining us. And I hope you, like we said, you get something. Each person gets a little something out of these podcasts, these shows. Thank you, everybody. Stay sane.